Good morning and welcome to SDS2 2015 webinar. My name is Mark Blau and I will be covering finite construction lines, finite grids, and curved and circular grids. So we will start out with the construction line enhancements. For finite construction lines, two physical points must be picked to add your finite construction line. So to add your finite construction line, we have added an icon on your toolbar here. You've got construction line add, and you also have finite construction line add. Or you can go up to your model pull down and go to construction lines, and then you have your add finite or CF. So I'm going to add my finite construction line here. I can zoom in on a point. Say I just want to add a construction line on this one beam here. I can go ahead and pick my 2 points. Now if you see, that added in just my finite construction line. Now with the picking of 2 points, with point locators, if you tried using perpendicular or angle, this will create an infinite construction line even if you use your finite construction line add tool. So if I come up here and I pick my first point here and then say I want to go perpendicular to this line, it's just going to throw in your infinite construction line, picking either perpendicular or angle there. Now if you use base construction line for adding in your finite construction line, it will depend on if that construction line was put in using 2 points or not. So if I go in here and add my finite construction line, if I use my base construction line, I just added this finite construction line. I can add that in and I can tell it to be 15 foot 0. I'm going to add that. It will add in my finite construction line. Now this construction line here is going to be off my base 0, 0, so I know that it was not added in using 2 points. So if I use this construction line and say I want to add it 6 foot 3 for my rolled canopy, it will give me my infinite construction line here. Now in order to edit my construction lines to see there, I can go to construction lines and edit or CE here, and I can edit this construction line. And notice that when I edit the construction line, my finite line option here is grayed out. I can pick my color, but I cannot pick finite construction line. Now if I come up here and type in CE on my keyboard to edit this finite construction line, I notice now, since I based it off of a construction line that had 2 points picked and was a finite construction line, I can either have it as finite or uncheck finite and have an infinite construction line. So if you pick 2 points or base off of a construction line that had 2 points picked, you can switch back and forth between finite and infinite. So I could edit this again, hit OK, and change it back to finite again, and now it's just my finite construction line. So now I will show too is if I'm going to delete my 2 construction lines here. Now if I add in a finite construction line here by picking my 2 points again, and then I'm going to edit that and make it an infinite construction line. So CE to edit my construction line, and I will make it an infinite construction line. Now if I add a finite construction line and base off of that construction line and go my 15 foot 0 again like before, it adds it as an infinite construction line, but since the 2 points were picked, I can edit this and change it to a finite construction line. Now we will be moving on to the grid line enhancements. And in order to put in your finite grid lines, instead of new view, now we have our add grid lines here, or you have your file and then view grids, and then I have my add grid line here, or GS. So I can go ahead and add my grid line here. I'm going to pick my 2 points. It'll bring up a screen to have my view name. So I'm going to put in B here, and then I have the option to have it be a finite or an infinite grid line here. I have my grid bubble setback, which this sets the grid bubbles out from the 2 points that you selected. You can only show grid bubbles on finite erection views. So for your finite grids, you can do your grid bubble showback. I will leave this at 0, and then we will move on to our relative view depth. This is only available for finite grid lines, and this is a range of elevations for where the grid line is visible. And it is independent of the depth check. And it will also reflect on your views in Drawing Editor. So I'm going to leave my relative view depth. I'm going to change my top to 126'0" because I know that's a roof on this building here, and I'll leave my bottom at 99'2". I will hit OK here. Now you can notice that it put in the finite grid line here with my bubbles, my grid bubbles. The setback I set at 0 so that it's at the 2 points that I picked. I'm going to add in grid line C here. I will change my grid bubble setback to 1. You'll notice that it retained my values when I went to add it in, so my top's already at 126 and 99'2". So I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. The only thing I changed about this was my grid bubble setback to 1. So now you'll notice that it's got a setback here based off the size of the grid bubble there. I will go ahead and add in grid line D, and I will change this to grid bubble setback of 2 so that you guys can see it. I'm also going to change my top of elevation at 105'0" so that I can show what the relative view depth will do here. So I'll go ahead and hit OK here. Now you notice that I go from 0 to 1 to 2 for my grid bubble setbacks. You can see the difference in distance here. The one thing I will point out here is that the extents for what you can view here when you picked your 2 points with a triangle like before is going to be the same no matter what your grid bubble is set back at. So because I picked the same points for B, C, and D when I was putting in my grid view or grid line there, it will see the same extents no matter what that my grid bubble setback is different there. That has no effect on the extents that you will see in your views there. Now you'll notice that we've got the grid bubble circles here. If you guys do not want grid bubbles shown, we have new options and display options here to where I can show grid bubbles on finite erection views. So if I uncheck that and hit apply, it will no longer show the grid bubbles for your finite erection views. I'm going to turn that back on and hit apply. The nice thing for that with the grid bubbles is if I come and zoom in here, you'll notice that if I come up here, I cannot tell my A from my B. The only way I can tell one is a finite line compared to an infinite grid line is with your grid bubble here. You'll also notice when I'm zooming out here that my grid bubbles are scaling here, getting larger as I zoom in and zoom out there and getting smaller as I zoom in. If you guys do not want that to scale, you can go to your display option and turn off scale erection views. And when I apply that, when I zoom in and out, the grid bubbles do not scale. With our erection views now, with your grid lines here, you now are able to open up just by double-clicking on the label or grid. If I want to open up A, if you notice I highlight over A here, I can double-click on it and it brings up my A. Also, if I want to go back, I've got my AB plan, my second floor, my roof framing. They highlight now. I can go ahead and double click on that and it will bring me back to my AB plan. So I can go back and forth. I do not have to do open view. I can just double click on my labels or grids. In order to select your labels or grids, your selection filter must be set at default, legacy default, or all up here in my selection filter. So default, legacy, default, or all. Now you can edit your grid lines to make changes here. In order to edit your grid lines, you have to change your selection filter to all or to grid lines. Once I change it to grid lines here, I can double click and edit my grid line. So I would be able to come in here and change my values here. If I want to, I can uncheck finite, hit OK. Now it's an infinite grid line and it takes away the grid bubble because it's no longer finite. I can come back in here and edit it, check it back onto finite, and it becomes my finite grid line again here. I can also go ahead and check out my relative view depth here. If I need to change my relative view depth, if it is not correct here, I can go ahead and change that. Okay, so with the relative view depth, we just saw that it was set from 99'2" to 105'0". So now if I would come up here and open my second floor, notice I've got an elevation of 114'6", higher than the 105'0" that I put in for my relative view depth. Now you notice that I do not have a grid line D because it will not show in my any plans that's either below 99'2" or above 105'0". Now if I open up grid line C here, I would have to change my filter back to my default, legacy, default, or all. I can go ahead and open up C. You notice that I can see AB plan, second floor, roof framing, and all my members within second floor and roof plan there. If I go back to my AB plan and open up grid line D, you will notice that my second floor plan and my roof plan are not showing because of my relative view depth there. And this will be the same thing as when we go to detail these erection views. You'll also notice my members here for my second floor or my roof are not showing up. Any members that have a part of that member inside of my relative view depth of 99'2" to 105'0" will show up in this erection view, but anything outside of that relative view depth will not show up. So I can go ahead and double click A/B plan again to be able to open that up. Now I can also delete my grid lines here. I can go up to my File pull down, Views and Grids, and I can go to Delete View, and it will just ask me which views I want to delete here. I can select and delete them. Otherwise, I can change my selection filter either to All or to Grid Lines, and if I select, and then I can hold down my Shift to multiple select there, and then if I hit Delete on my keyboard, it will come up and ask me, am I sure I want to delete View C? So I can hit Yes, and then it will come and ask me delete View D. So if you select them and delete them, it will ask you for each grid line that you are wanting to delete there. Going to add in back in B here. I'll have them the same as what they were before, and I'm going to add in grid line C here. Leave the defaults. I'll add in grid line D. Change my grid bubble to 2, and I'm going to change this back to 105'0" so that we can be able to detail that erection view so you can see what exactly happens with that. So now we will move on to curved and circular grid lines. Curved and circular grid lines, you cannot open curved and circular grid lines like you can do your grid lines. And you can edit these curved and circular grid lines. The radius can be changed while editing them. You will be able to see these curved and circular grid lines in Drawing Editor. So let's go ahead and add in a curved grid line here. There are two options here. You have the icon for Add Curved Grid 3 points, or I could go to my File pull down again, View Grids, and add curved grid 3 points, or GP for your keyboard shortcut. I'll go ahead and click that. And what I can do here is I can pick my 2 points that I want for my arc, and then it will ask me to pick my 3rd point for my radius here. So I will just pick this point here, and it will bring up my new erection view. So I will call this Test 1. I will leave my grid bubble set back at 0. I will change this so that I can see this anywhere from 99'2" to 126'0". I'll leave my erection view type as primary, leave all my colors the same and line types the same. I'll hit OK here, and it will put in my curved grid here. Now I'm going to put in some construction lines here so that I can show the grid bubble option. So I can pick this point and this point, and I'll go ahead and add in my curved grid 3 point again, and I'm going to pick my same 2 points here, and then I'll pick my arc here. Call this Test 2. And then I'm going to change my grid bubble setback to 2 here, just so I can show you guys the difference here on the curved grids. So once I put that in, you can see where it is setting it back 2 grid bubbles from the 2 points that I picked. Now, for picking your points, you can pick your points anywhere that you would like for your grids, and then pick your 3rd point there for your arc. Pick the point along the arc here. With these curved and circular grid lines, you will have a whole center here for your arc, to where if I come up here and change my selection filter to grid line, if I highlight over this, you guys can see that it's got a center there for the curved grids that I can, if I need to add in a construction line, I can use construction line and then exact point, and it will pick my grid center here of my arcs. If you guys do not want to see the centers here, you can go up to display option and uncheck center of curved grid lines. Uncheck that and hit apply, and now you do no longer see the center of your arcs, but you can still snap to it using exact point. I still can snap to my grid center here for using exact point to be able to add in construction lines or whatever you need to add in there. So now we will move on to the Add Curved Grid Radius, which we have a icon up here on my toolbar, or I can go to File, pull down, View Grids, and Add Curved Grid Radius, or GR. So I will go ahead and add that here. I can add, or it will ask me to pick my radius point, so I will pick my radius point. I can change this to test 4 here. I'll leave my grid bubble set back at 0. I want my top to be able to go all the way up to 126.0. Now you have new options here of, do I want an arc or a circle? I'm going to leave this at an arc, and I'll change my radius to 20.0, and then I will hit OK to this window. Now it is asking me to pick my points, the 2 points for my arc here. SDS2 goes in a counterclockwise direction, so if I pick from left to right, it's going to come down along this circle here. If I pick from right to left, it will go counterclockwise along this circle. So if I pick left to right here, it will give me my arc here with my grid bubbles being right at the points I picked. I can also do another one here where I'll change the name here and leave everything else default. And then I could pick my right to left point if I want that arc there for my curved grid. I can also come over here and do another one here. I'll call it 6, and then I'm going to pick circle instead of arc. Once I pick circle, my grid bubble setback is grayed out. Now I am no longer able to pick my grid bubble setback. So I will go ahead and hit OK here, and it is asking me to locate where I want my grid bubble at. So I can go ahead and just pick a point here, and it will put my grid bubble there. If I have my selection filter set to all or grid lines, I can go ahead and edit them. I could change my radius to 30.0 here and make it a larger radius, so I am able to update that. Now what I want to be able to show you is, if with your grid bubbles, if you're zooming in with the grid bubbles there, it will start to show you where the ends of your points are there, to where it will show multiple grid points when you're zooming in. I zoom in to here, it will start to adjust that to where your grid bubble will always be showing in your window there when you zoom in. Let's go ahead, and I'm going to detail a couple of my erection views here to show you how the relative view depth works for in Drawing Editor. So I'm going to detail, change this to wire, annotate and remove all here. And I'm going to pick C and D, and then my second floor plan here to detail. I will pull up Drawing Editor. I'm going to open up, if you remember with C, I told it my relative view depth to be from 99'2" to 126'0", so I can see all of the views in here and all of my members. If I go over to D, I set my relative view depth from 99'2" to 105'0". So here I can only see my AB plan here. I cannot see my second floor plan or my roof plan, and I can only see my members that go either through or inside of my relative view depth, which is 99'2" to 105'0". Also, if you remember, when I open up my second floor plan, it does not have my grid line D on here because at the elevation of 114'6", it was not going to show my grid line D here. And then you can also see an example here of your curved grid lines and your arcs here. So that concludes the webinar for today.